I wasn't supposed to be there that morning. The plan was simple. Sleep in a bit, have breakfast with my brother who was in town, maybe double-check the final wedding logistics before Caitlin and I said our vows later that evening. But instead, I found myself staring at my phone around 6:45 a.m., unable to go back to sleep. Caitlin's calendar alert had gone off the night before. A business conference at the downtown Marriott, presentation scheduled for 8:30 a.m. sharp. She hadn't invited me. That wasn't odd in itself. I mean, she said it was some work-related, high-stakes pitch for an investment partnership, and she didn't want distractions. But the way she mentioned it last week had felt off, like she was rehearsing the words instead of actually telling me. I couldn't explain it. Call it nerves. Call it intuition. Call it the last flicker of doubt I had buried so deep I almost forgot it was there. So I got up, showered, put on a clean button-up and her favorite cologne, picked up a lavender latte with oat milk, the one she always said tasted like calm in a cup, and I drove across town with the radio off and too many thoughts in my head. I didn't expect anything to be wrong. Not really. I wanted to be the supportive fiancé, the guy who showed up when it mattered, who saw her not just in a white dress but in her element. Fierce, focused, brilliant. I wanted to remind her, in case she needed reminding, that I was all in. When I arrived, the lobby was already buzzing. People in suits and smart dresses moved like they knew exactly where they were going. I asked the concierge where the executive breakout sessions were, and he pointed me toward a conference hall tucked past the banquet rooms. Name on the door should say, Paramount Growth Strategy Presentation, he said. That the one? I nodded. Yeah, that's the one. As I got closer, I heard her voice before I saw her. Confident, measured, the kind of tone Caitlin always used when she had something to prove, and knew she was going to win. The double doors were halfway open. I stepped in quietly, not wanting to interrupt. That's when I saw it. There she was, Caitlin, standing near the podium, her back mostly to me. Her hair pulled back the way she always did when she meant business. Her black blazer hugged her figure just enough to be sharp without trying too hard. She had a stack of cue cards in one hand and the other was in his. A man stood beside her, tall, mid-30s maybe, with that expensive kind of confidence. Gray suit, no tie, open collar. He was leaning slightly toward her, and their hands were linked like it was second nature. Like it wasn't strange. Like it wasn't completely insane given that her fiancé, me, was due to marry her in less than 12 hours. I froze. He noticed me first. His posture stiffened just enough to give it away. He said something under his breath to Caitlin, and her head whipped around. Our eyes locked. Her hand dropped. Her expression. I will never forget that look. Half shock, half fear. Maybe even a flicker of guilt before she scrambled into a smile. Thomas? She said, louder than necessary. The pitch of her voice didn't match her expression. What are you doing here? I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Still, I held up the latte and tried to smile. Thought I'd surprise you. Big day. Figured I'd get to see my fiancé in action. She walked over fast, heels clicking like a metronome on overdrive. Cue cards now clutched against her chest like a shield. That's so sweet, she said, reaching out for the coffee. I wasn't expecting you. I mean, you had a lot to do today, and I wrapped everything early, I said, my voice lower now. Wanted to be here. She nodded, her smile faltering for a second. This is Nate, by the way. He's an old business partner. From New York. We were just going over last-minute slides. Nate gave me the kind of polite nod people reserve for elevators and awkward greetings. Nice to meet you, man. Heard a lot about you. I didn't reply. I just looked at Caitlin. And I wish I could say I didn't care. That my gut didn't twist. That my head wasn't already spinning through every possible explanation. But in that moment, everything slowed. The sound of her voice. The way she clutched her cards a little too tightly. The way Nate casually stepped back to the projector, like nothing had happened. I didn't mean to interrupt, I said finally. I'll just sit in the back. Of course, Caitlin said quickly. Yeah, I'm about to start anyway. The lights dimmed. People began filing into the room. I slid into a chair in the back row, still holding the coffee, though I didn't take another sip. My hand was shaking too much. The presentation started. She was perfect, just like always. Her slides were clean, her data was sharp, and her confidence was unshakable. The whole room leaned in as she spoke, especially Nate, who stood by like a co-host without saying much except to chime in at strategic moments. They worked well together, I'll give them that. Like they had done this a dozen times. But every time Caitlin looked over at him, and she did more than once, it wasn't just partnership. It was familiarity. It was warmth. It was the kind of look you give someone when there's history behind it. She never looked at me like that during the presentation. Not once. When it was over, the room erupted into polite applause. A few people came up to shake her hand, compliment the work, ask follow-up questions. I waited by the door, silent. She eventually made her way over to me, her smile tighter now. You didn't have to come, she said, trying to sound casual. Guess I didn't, I replied. She glanced around, then leaned in. You okay? I'm fine, I said, lying so obviously I could see her wince. You did great. We stood there in silence for a second. Do you want to grab breakfast or something before we go meet the family? She asked, like we were just another couple with a wedding to get to. I looked down at the coffee cup still in my hand. It had gone cold. Sure, I said. Yeah, let's do that. Because what else could I say? This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I'd already told myself I wasn't going to get cold feet. But now I wasn't sure whose feet were colder. As we walked out together, I glanced back one more time. Nate was still in the room, packing up their laptop. He didn't look at me, but he didn't need to. Something had just shifted, and I couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. The rest of that day moved like I was underwater. We had breakfast at this little spot near the hotel, the kind with overpriced eggs and reclaimed wood everything. Caitlin sat across from me with that picture-perfect posture, stirring her cappuccino like nothing had happened. She smiled, cracked jokes, asked about my brother's flight schedule and whether my mom was still on her no-gluten-ever kick. I nodded, answered where I had to, laughed where I was supposed to. But the whole time, my brain was elsewhere. Replaying the moment in that conference room like a broken tape. That handhold. That flash of panic in her eyes when she saw me. Nate? The name was now lodged in my chest like a splinter. An old business partner. That's what she called him. But if he was so old, why hadn't I ever heard of him before? Caitlin talked about work constantly, every deal, every client, every late night she spent fixing a slide deck for some investor who needed it yesterday. And yet, not once had she ever mentioned Nate. That should have been enough. But the truth was, the signs had been there for a while. I just didn't want to see them. Not until now. It started a few months back, maybe January. Caitlin began pulling longer hours than usual. She said her firm had landed a huge client from New York and that she'd been paired with another strategist, someone with connections to the East Coast scene. That detail felt important to her when she said it, like it explained everything. She even sounded proud, like it was a professional win. It's going to be intense for a few weeks, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed one night as she slipped off her earrings. But if we nail it, I could be looking at senior partner early next year. I smiled and said I was proud of her. And I was. I always had been. Caitlin was sharp, the kind of person who could sell fire to a volcano and make it seem logical. I figured the late nights were just a necessary evil. We were both ambitious. We had always respected that in each other. But then it kept going. She'd leave earlier in the morning, come home later at night. Sometimes past midnight. Her explanations became more vague. Strategy session ran long. Client's investor pushed the meeting. We hit a snag in the budget forecast. I didn't question her at first. I mean, we were planning a wedding. I assumed the kind of stress just added to everything else. I started handling more of the logistics, florists, RSVPs, dealing with my parents' opinions about the seating chart just so she could stay focused. That's what love is, right? Picking up the slack. Being the steady one when the other person's drowning. But then there was the night I made dinner, real dinner, not takeout. Her favorite pasta, that stupid kale salad she insisted made her feel clean, candles, music. I'd even printed the wedding playlist and arranged it in a tiny envelope on her plate, thinking it'd be romantic. She came home 2 hours late. No apology. She kissed me on the cheek and said she wasn't that hungry. That Nate, no, my partner, had ordered sushi to the office. I didn't think much of it in the moment, just watched her drop her heels at the door and head to the shower. But when I cleaned up the table, I noticed she'd never even opened the envelope. And when I tossed her plate into the trash, she hadn't touched a bite. Then there was the phone thing. She used to leave it on the counter, screen up, when we cooked or hung out. But lately it was always with her, even in the bathroom. Always face down. Always locked. She had a passcode at first, but one day I saw her switch it to fingerprint. I asked why. She shrugged. Faster. A few days later, I walked into the room while she was on her laptop. I caught a glimpse of some chat window, definitely not Slack, definitely not email, and she closed it immediately. Who was that? I asked, trying to keep it casual. She smiled a little too tightly. Just some internal back and forth. Boring stuff. Right? Boring. Except every time I walked into a room, she was minimizing windows like a teenager hiding a game from their parents. And at dinner, she started zoning out, staring into her water glass like it had answers. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give these clipped replies like I was quizzing her on something she hadn't studied for. Sometimes she'd snap out of it, give me a smile, squeeze my hand, talk about the wedding or how excited she was for the honeymoon. And for a while, I let those moments convince me everything was fine. Because I wanted it to be fine. I needed it to be. But after that morning in the conference room, all those little things came rushing back like they were on fire. Later that afternoon, back at the apartment, Caitlin was getting ready for the rehearsal dinner. She was in the bedroom, pacing in front of the mirror, curling her hair like the day hadn't started with her hand in another man's. I was in the living room, staring at a spot on the wall. I should have said something. I should have confronted her. Asked her straight up what that was this morning. But I didn't. Because I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if it really was just a hand squeeze before a big presentation? People do weird things when they're nervous. And maybe they were close once, old friends, former colleagues, and maybe I walked in at the exact wrong time. Except I knew I wasn't wrong. Not really. And I think she knew that I knew. She walked out of the bedroom in a soft green dress I'd never seen before. It looked expensive. She wore it like armor. You look amazing, I said, because the words came out automatically. She smiled, came over, kissed my cheek. You're sweet. Then she stepped back, studying my face. You okay? I nodded. Just tired. There was a pause. The kind of silence where everything not said hung between us like a glass about to fall. You sure? She asked again, softer this time. I held her gaze. Yeah, I'm sure. And that was it. We went to the rehearsal dinner. Smiled for photos. Toasted champagne. She laughed at my dad's dumb speech. I held her hand under the table. Everything looked perfect. But my gut knew. I just didn't have the proof yet. The wedding never happened. No dramatic announcement, no storming out, no crying guests, just a quiet unraveling that started the night before and ended with a silent phone call to the venue early the next morning. Caitlin never questioned the cancellation, and I didn't offer an explanation. We just drifted away from it like a dream we both woke up from, but only one of us remembered was real. I told everyone we'd postponed, too much stress, needed to breathe, the usual PR version of heartbreak. Caitlin went along with it. She told her bridesmaids it was mutual. My mom didn't believe that for a second, but she didn't push. She just gave me that look moms give their sons when they know their hearts are heavier than their mouths can admit. I packed a bag and stayed at my brother's place for a few days. Just enough time to think. Or at least try. Most of it was a blur, long walks, skipped meals, pretending to care about baseball games I didn't watch. But even through all the haze, one thing was clear, something was still unfinished. Because whatever Caitlin was doing, whatever she had been doing, hadn't stopped. And I needed to see it for myself. 3 days after the wedding I returned to our apartment. She wasn't there. Most of her things were makeup bags, heels, her monogrammed robe, but she wasn't. I told myself I was only there to grab a few more clothes, maybe pick up my laptop. But the truth? I couldn't let it go. I couldn't live with the ambiguity. Not after everything I gave her. Not after everything we were supposed to be. So I did something I never thought I would. I went to her office. I didn't call ahead. Didn't text. I just showed up like I had every right to be there. Which up until a few days ago, I did. We were engaged. I'd picked her up from that office countless times. Brought her food, carried her home when she worked late. Her coworkers knew me. Or at least they used to. The receptionist was new. She gave me a tight smile and pointed me toward the glass conference rooms on the east side of the floor. She's in a meeting, she said. But it looks like they're wrapping up. I nodded and walked toward the frosted doors, each one marked with some vague corporate label, Summit, Echo, Crestview. And then I saw her. Through the slightly open door labeled Horizon Room. She was standing with her back to me, her hair tied up in a loose bun. He was behind her, Nate, his arms casually draped around her waist, lips close to her ear. She laughed. Not her fake client laugh, but the real one. The kind she used to save for me. They didn't see me. I could have walked in. Thrown open the door. Asked 1,000 questions. But I didn't. I just watched. Watched as she turned and let him pull her close. Watched as she smiled and pressed her forehead against his chest like she belonged there. On the table behind them, 2 half-empty champagne glasses. Next to them, a pair of plane tickets. I couldn't see the whole itinerary, but I caught just enough. MIA Terminal C. Miami. I blinked. Once. Twice. Trying to convince myself I hadn't read that right. But the letters burned into my brain like embers. Champagne. Plane tickets. In asterisk Macy. Affection. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a full-blown relationship. And I had been the decoy. I left without saying a word. The elevator ride down was quiet, too quiet. I think there was music playing, some instrumental jazz thing, but I couldn't hear it over the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. The moment the doors opened, I walked straight outside. Didn't wait for an Uber. Didn't even pull out my phone. I just kept walking. Block after block. Through intersections, past office buildings, over cracked sidewalks, and through crowds of people who had no idea that my life had just collapsed in the span of 5 seconds. I don't know how long I walked. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. I ended up at this little park on 8th, the one Caitlin used to like because of the food trucks and the old trees. We'd had our 3rd date there. I sat on a bench and stared at a couple throwing a frisbee like nothing had happened. But something had. And I couldn't unsee it. She had chosen him. On our wedding week, in the middle of what was supposed to be our forever, she had chosen someone else. Not in secret. Not in shame. But with glasses clinking and bags packed. What K** led me wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the trip. It was the ease. The way she moved with him. The softness in her laugh. The way her body leaned into his like they were gravity-bound. That's what broke me. Because I realized then she wasn't confused. She wasn't caught between 2 people. She was already gone. Later that night, she texted me. Caitlin, hey, hope you're okay. I know this week has been hard. Can we talk? No apology. No confession. Just a text to test the waters. To see if I'd stay silent. To see if she still had me on the hook. I didn't answer. The next morning, she called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice was soft, hesitant. She said she missed me. That we had so much to unpack. That she'd explain everything. Everything. As if what I saw needed translation. As if it was some kind of visual misunderstanding, like the plane tickets were a prop or the champagne was for a client, or maybe Nate was just European? No. There was nothing left to explain. Only silence. And distance. And the quiet decision I had made the moment I walked away from that glass door. 2 days later, I packed up my car. My brother had a guest room in Arizona and an extra key. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I just left a city that suddenly felt like it didn't have a place for me anymore. On the drive out somewhere past the state line, I stopped at a gas station. Bought water. Stared at the highway map out of habit. Then I did something I didn't plan. I mailed Caitlin a box. Inside it, I placed every single one of our wedding invitations. All of them unmailed, unread, unfulfilled. I had cut each one cleanly in half. No note. No message. No return address. Just the reality in paper form. This was over. It was almost midnight when I heard the knock. I was in Arizona by then, crashing on my brother's pull-out couch in his spare room. The air was dry and the silence out here was different, heavier, almost too still. For days, I hadn't spoken much. My brother respected that. He knew better than to ask. He just tossed me a beer at night and let me sit with the weight of everything I wasn't ready to say. But that night, the knock came like thunder. It wasn't the front door, it was the side. The one that led to the yard barely used. I froze for a second, phone in hand, thumb hovering over a half-finished message I wasn't even sure I meant to send. When I opened the door, there she was. Caitlin. Hair drenched from the rain, makeup washed away, breathing heavy like she'd run blocks to get here. Her arms were crossed, not from the cold, from desperation. Her suitcase sat behind her like some half-hearted proof that she wasn't just visiting. I stared at her for a beat too long. Her eyes flicked past me like she was hoping to see something inside the house, maybe forgiveness. Or maybe just familiarity. Thomas, she said, voice breaking. Can we talk? I didn't move. She took a slow step forward, not fully across the threshold. I know I shouldn't have come like this, but I didn't know what else to do. You wouldn't answer. I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking if I could just see you. I said nothing. Just leaned against the door frame and waited for her to say something real. I made a mistake, she whispered. A huge one. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how small that word sounded now, mistake. Like what I'd seen was a typo in an email. Like she'd just taken a wrong turn and not planned a trip with another man on the day we were supposed to become husband and wife. She searched my face. It wasn't serious. Nate and it wasn't what I wanted. I thought it was. I don't know. I got caught up in something stupid and God, I don't even have a good excuse. You don't. That was the first thing I'd said. She flinched. I know. We stood there in silence again, the kind that builds up in your bones. She looked so different. So unguarded. Her eyes red-rimmed. Her voice no longer polished. For the first time in months, there was no performance. But it was too late. I was confused, she said, and Nate, he's not who I thought he was. He's not serious about me. He never was. I ended it. I don't want him. I never loved him. She was shaking now like the words cost her something. Thomas, I love you. You've always been the one who kept me steady. The one who believed in me. I lost my head and forgot what that meant. But I remember now. I do. I should have felt something. But all I could see was the way she looked at him in that office. The way her smile unfolded without effort. The way her body leaned into his like she didn't remember she had a fiancé at all. Why now? I asked. Why come here, Caitlin? Because I ruined everything, she said, eyes filling again. And now he's not calling and your number's dead and I can't breathe. I miss you. I miss us. Us. It sounded hollow now. I stepped back slightly, enough to make it clear. You should go. She blinked like she hadn't processed the words. Wait, what? You don't mean that. I do. Thomas, she stepped forward, voice rising, please. You know me. You know I'm not like this. I panicked. Everything was moving so fast with the wedding and work and I felt like I was drowning. I thought if I could just escape for a while, I'd come back and things would make sense. And did they? I asked. She hesitated. No. Then why did you have tickets to Miami? Her mouth opened but nothing came out. Just the rain behind her, steady and cold. You were already gone, Caitlin, I said, quieter now. Long before I saw you two in that room. You'd been leaving me piece by piece. I just didn't want to admit it. She shook her head, tears sliding down. I didn't mean for it to go that far. You didn't mean for me to find out. That hit her. I saw it in the way her hands clenched. She looked away for a second, wiping her face. You were my person, I said. The one I wanted to build everything with. You didn't just cheat on me. You built a whole lie. Smiled through wedding plans while you were planning a different life. You let me love you while you disappeared. I didn't mean to, she said again. Yeah. You keep saying that. We stood there, soaked in silence again. Her eyes begged for a door that no longer existed. I drove 14 hours, she said. I didn't even stop. I thought maybe, I don't know. I thought if you saw me like this, maybe you'd believe I still care. I believe you care, I said. Just not the way I needed you to. Her shoulders collapsed. Caitlin, I added, I'm not your backup plan. She winced, turning away like the words stung. Maybe they did. And I don't know what hurt more, watching her cry or realizing that I no longer felt the urge to comfort her. She looked back one more time. There's nothing I can say, is there? No. Not even sorry? Especially not sorry. She nodded, once slow, like it was too heavy. Then she turned, pulled her suitcase off the ground, and walked into the night without asking where the nearest hotel was. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe she just needed to feel what it was like to be truly alone. I closed the door. Locked it. Sat on the floor for an hour afterward, staring at the place she'd stood. And for the first time since everything fell apart. I didn't cry. The morning after Caitlin showed up, I woke up to her name on my phone again. This time it was an email. Just her name in the sender field and the subject line, please read this. I didn't open it. Didn't mark it unread. Didn't delete it either. I just stared at it for a few seconds and let it sit there, frozen between a decision I'd already made and a closure she still refused to accept. That was how most of my days felt now, two people trying to unwrite the same story from opposite ends. I had left the pages blank. She kept scribbling in the margins, hoping I'd flip back. But I wasn't going to. I'd already made the hardest choice of all, nothing. Silence is underrated. People think closure comes with big speeches, drawn-out conversations, some final dramatic scene where everything gets laid bare. But it doesn't. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is walk away without explanation because deep down they already know. After Caitlin left that night, she didn't stop reaching out. First it was the email. Then 2 more. Then texts, short, sad ones at first. I'm sorry. Are you okay? I just want to talk. Then they got longer. Apologies turned into justifications. Blame started to get sprinkled in like seasoning she hoped I wouldn't taste. I was under so much pressure. Everything was happening too fast. I was scared. You didn't notice how unhappy I was. I didn't know how to say it. Nate wasn't what I thought. He didn't want a real future. I was stupid. That one made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was so transparent. She wasn't apologizing because she understood what she did. She was apologizing because she got left behind. Because he didn't choose her either. Remorse had walked in after the door was already closed. I didn't respond. Not to the emails. Not to the messages. Not even to the one she sent to my mom asking if she could just talk to him just for 5 minutes. 5 minutes wouldn't undo 5 months. A few days later, my brother walked into the kitchen while I was flipping through a box of old mail I'd left behind in the move. He poured coffee, glanced at me. "She's still trying?" he asked. I nodded. "You gonna answer her?" "Nope." He didn't push. Just took a sip and muttered, "Good." That was the thing about people who loved you without needing explanations. They didn't ask why you were quiet. They just gave you space to be. I didn't owe Caitlin a speech. She already knew what I'd seen. She knew what she'd done. She just didn't like the part where it cost her something. So instead of words, I sent something else. The wedding invitations had been sitting in a brown cardboard box back at my place, stacked neatly in rows, tied with navy blue ribbon Caitlin had picked out herself. They were elegant. Timeless. A design she called subtle but lasting. Irony burns differently when it's dressed up in cursive. I took a pair of scissors, sat at the table, and one by one, sliced them in half. Each one. I didn't rush it. I cut through our names. Our date. The little quote at the top that said, "What's meant to be will always find its way." I cut through the RSVP cards, the directions, the menu preferences. By the end, my hands were covered in tiny shreds of promises. Then I packed them all, the halves, into a plain envelope. No note. No signature. Just the pieces of the life she'd fractured. I sent it to her office. That way she'd know I didn't want to hear her voice anymore. I wanted her to feel the silence. A week passed. Then, too, Caitlin stopped texting after that. The emails got shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I could picture her face reading the invitation fragments, her trying to tape them back together in her head, wondering if this was really it. It was. Because the thing about betrayal is that it isn't always loud. It can happen in silence. In the spaces where honesty used to live. And by the time the truth makes itself undeniable, it's already carved a hole too deep to patch. She'd used her words to lie. I was using my silence to tell the truth. I stayed in Arizona longer than I planned. My brother gave me the space. I found a rhythm, long hikes in the morning, old vinyl records in the evening. I even started reading again. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for the next excuse. Or explanation. Or breakdown. I was just still. I told myself I'd know when I was ready to leave. That moment came unexpectedly one afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun drop behind the mountains. My phone buzzed with a notification from a mutual friend, a forwarded message Caitlin had sent in a group chat from before everything broke. "Just so everyone knows, the wedding's off. We're taking time to figure things out. Please respect our space." Our space. As if we were on the same side of this. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the reply button. But I didn't answer. I deleted it. A few days later, I booked a flight. Not back home, not yet, but to a nearby city where I didn't know anyone. I needed to remember who I was without her shadow looming over me. I got a short-term rental, found a job at a local marketing firm, started building a new rhythm. I never told Caitlin where I went. She didn't ask. Which honestly was the loudest thing she ever said.